Welcome back to another video of the E90 M3. Basically, if you guys haven't watched the last video, just go ahead and watch it. I bought this car. It has 64,000 miles and also a seized motor. So anyways, what I didn't do in the last video was remove all the rod bearings that I possibly could. And so what I just did is just that, and still no signs of failure in any of them. So another hypothesis that someone told me that could have happened is he could have overheated the motor, and then when he shut it off, like once he was done doing donuts, the cylinder could have seized in the cylinder wall. But so far, I mean, I only took off 4, but to push it up and pull it back, I was only able to remove half of the rod bearings, because the other ones, like, I can get to this bolt here, but I cannot get to the other bolt because the bottom end is in the way. So same with here, I can get to this bolt, but I can't get to that one because I can't spin it to get to that point. But I guess I'm gonna go ahead and try to spin it again. But you know what I'm scared of? There's no subframe on the car, and it's just being held up by that bar, so I don't want to damage the fenders because they are plastic. But I guess I'll just feel it out. Let's see what happens. No way, I got it to spin a little bit. It's spinning. It's literally spinning. All right, good news. I think I'm gonna be able to get all the rod bearings off. Let's go. Still don't think it's gonna be rod bearing failure, but I guess we'll find out right now. Let's just continue spinning it until we can remove the rest of them. I also need to make sure that I don't get any of them out of order, because it's actually really cool. So the way that these are separated from the piston is that they are cracked. So as you see how they're cracked right there, basically the piston's a complete piston and they just crack it off. There's probably like weak points and they crack it off, and then it basically makes it to where this perfectly goes on to the other side of the piston. So it's pretty cool. All right, so pulled all the rod bearing ends or caps that I could, and rod bearings themselves. I couldn't get this one out and I couldn't get this one out, but I don't know how well you guys can see, but I don't know the condition of these. They do look like they're scored and whatnot, but I mean, none of them spun. That's the important part. It doesn't matter what they look like as long as they didn't damage the crank. But yeah, I couldn't get those two out. It doesn't really matter too much. They're probably gonna look exactly the same as the rest of them. But we do now have an issue. I literally stripped the crank pulley, so I can no longer spin the motor. I guess I'm gonna go up top and remove one of the valve covers and try to get the cam lobe off and see the condition of the cam lobe. Also, here's the frame. I never showed you guys in the last video, but there's a pretty big crease right there, and then up in this corner over here you can see that the seam sealer is starting to come apart. This is all supposed to be straight up here. That honestly does not matter. That can just be hammered out, but this right here matters a lot. It's the next day now, and I honestly don't know what to do besides just pull the motor out of the car and start taking it apart more and more in depth, just to try to figure out what's wrong with it. Put it on an engine stand and try to see what's stopping it from spinning. I think that's just like the smartest thing to do, because whatever it may be, it's probably going to be easier to rebuild it when the motor's out of the car anyways. AC stuff gets out of the car, we are going to be able to drop the motor out. Really hope I'm not doing this for no reason, and me dropping the motor helps me figure out what's wrong with it. Got the motor out. For a lot of people, this is a big deal, taking a motor out of the car, but I promise you, if you do it once or twice, 3 times, it's just nuts and bolts at the end of the day. So the next step is to remove the transmission, get it up on a motor stand. So I kind of want to remove this wiring as well, because it's just all over the place. Okay, it is now a new day. I have some more time on my hands, and now that we have the S65 on an engine stand, we can start disassembling the front end of the motor. So basically I'm going to take off the timing covers everywhere and just see if I can see anything wrong there. If there's nothing wrong there, then we have to take apart the bottom end and see if the main bearing is good or not. If it's bad, probably not going to end up rebuilding this motor and just selling it. Hopefully someone ends up needing it. It has been about like a 3 or 4 day process of me trying to figure out what's wrong with this motor. Not because I've been sitting here for 3 or 4 days trying to tear it apart.
Stop the cap! Stop the cap right now! Stop the cap!
It's just I have a lot of other things going on, and also look at the shop. It's so packed up in here. We have half of an E46 M3 sitting over here, half of an E36 M3. Good thing the shop owner doesn't watch these videos. Anyhow, we are basically one step away from figuring out if it's either something to do with the chains, which would do with timing and vanos, which are these things. The motor's completely upside down right now, by the way. I'm just gonna take the timing guides off of this chain. It'll loosen it up, and if it still doesn't spin, that means the main bearing went bad, which you can't really see them or get to them until you take the whole bottom part of the motor out, which is this section right here, which for me to be able to do that, I would have to reposition where the motor's being held up because it's currently screwed into that bottom part. So regardless, right now we're about to find out what's wrong with the motor. Honestly, if it is the chain and other stuff, I'll be rebuilding it, but if it's the main bearing, I will not be rebuilding this motor. That was not fun to clean up. I left a bucket on the motor stand, like right here, full of coolant, and it obviously tipped when I started working on the motor again because I didn't remove it, and coolant went absolutely everywhere. But now that that's cleaned up, I kind of reorganized all the parts that I removed on this blanket right here, and that time as well I removed the other timing guide, which made this chain tension. So now that there's no tension on this chain and no tension on this chain, the crank would technically be able to move a little bit forward and back. So obviously this tells us that the only thing that could possibly be stopping it at this point is a main bearing. So that sucks. Honestly, I was super hopeful that it wouldn't be a main bearing and this motor would be rebuildable. Alright, well guys, here's the verdict. This crease right here tells us that it spun because this is supposed to be flush with the block, and so yeah, it definitely spun a main bearing, and I can even feel with my finger that there's some damage that's going to be done to the block and to the bottom end of the block, I guess. It's right here. Yeah, it's pretty damaged, but probably not as bad as other examples. I feel it with my nail. So yeah, it's crazy, but kind of had to be this. Couldn't be anything else. Also, this motor is no good, unfortunately, but not really something else taken by surprise. So I guess if anybody has an S65 for sale with relatively low miles, please hit me up on Instagram DMs. And yeah, I guess in the next video we'll probably either be addressing the frame damage or swapping the motor.